So when I was growing up, my heroes in the 1980s were Superman and Wonder Woman. I was enthralled by them. There was no limits to what they could do. They soared to new heights, moved with speed and agility, and really they were incredible. And today in procurement, we're going to need real heroes. And I'm going to tell you why. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to take a journey through AI in procurement. This is based on my experience in Kearney. I come to DPW as a procurement practitioner. I've been with Kearney for 13 years, and I have a passion for innovation in procurement and how that can help our function mature and evolve. And Kearney will know a bit about procurement. They invented strategic sourcing in the 1980s and have had decades of uninterrupted innovation since then. And so it's with that heritage and the recent work we've done on generative AI in procurement that I want to share with you what's in our crystal ball around what generative AI is going to mean for the function. 3 things. 1, half of today's procurement jobs will be gone in 10 years. The jobs, skills, competencies, roles that we have in procurement, they're going to go. Half of those are going to go. Yes, we're going to need new roles, we're going to need new skills, but it's a moment of consequential change, and we need to get ready for that. Secondly, procurement will evolve to become a margin growth function. Yes, all the administrative stuff, cost reduction, savings, all of that will happen, but we will have the opportunity to live up to the promise of achieving the goals of becoming a margin growth function, achieving the strategic objectives of the organization. And the last one, users will love procurement. I mean, users in the business will love procurement. They will love interacting with procurement. They will love the value that procurement brings for them. And so the question is, how is all of this going to happen? Right? What Amsterdam coffee shop did this guy stop at on his way here this morning that he believes that this will happen? Well, let me share with you why I think it's going to happen. Our view of generative AI and how it's going to impact procurement is here. We see it as a series of independent agents that are able to complete individual tasks. At the same time, they can orchestrate and work together to achieve entire processes. They do this with the ability to reason, with rationale, in an evidence-based way, with self-awareness on the accuracy of what the outputs are and what they're performing. And they are trained with the heroes you have in procurement today, with the category expertise that you have, and all of this gets embedded within this capability. But anyway, enough about this. This is our view of the future, and if you want to know more about this, come find me afterwards. I want to introduce Valentina Fani. She is the CPO at Allianz. Valentina is leading the transformation at Allianz through the lens of digital, data, process, and making great things happen. Come up, Valentina.
Thanks, everybody, for hosting me here to discuss about all this interesting stuff on GenAI, digital transformation, and all this stuff that us old CPOs generally don't really know about, but we have other people who help us on this.
Over the summer, we did a survey of 100 procurement leaders. And we asked them, what do you think about generative AI? Where do you see it going? And the findings, frankly, shocked me. Very surprising. I did a preview of this last week at an event in London, and there was a lot of, for those of you who were there, will remember there was a lot of emotion in the room, so I'm interested to see how this goes. Let's get into it. So the first question we asked was, in the next 3 years, what will your approach be to harness GenAI capabilities for procurement? And we offered 3 options. Are you going to build in-house? Are you kind of do it yourself, building on your enterprise capabilities around LLM and cloud infrastructure? Are you going to build with some external help, or are you just going to buy stuff? And the fact that 96 of the 100 said we're going to build either in-house or with external support shocked me, because for the last few decades, the question hasn't been build or buy. The question is, what do I buy? Do I buy a suite? Do I go to the expo hall and find some new cool solution that's going to solve my pain point? This feels like a transformational shift. And to test whether something had been interpreted wrong, I called up Valentina and said, what do you think?
Well, I'm not sure at all, actually, because we are part of those who are building. And the reason why we are doing this is that, the volatility is still very high. The technology is exponential. The regulation is evolving. And the market had not yet had the time to perform this Darwinistic selection to split, basically, those who are presenting themselves as champions of GenAI, but actually are not, and those who will be instead the winners. So we preferred at the end of the day to stay flexible and to do our own stuff, also depending on how things evolve. It must also be said that we were in the condition that we could do it because we already had our own infrastructure, because Allianz started to invest on GenAI readiness quite at the beginning, let's say, of this hype. So we already have our own data platform, which is global, and we already had our own Allianz GPT that accesses on top of market data, our own data. So we were basically in the condition to start prototyping from day one. And actually, it was faster to get a prototype in place than to get the budget to do it, just to give you an example. So we preferred at the end of the day this way, and it is not a given that we will continue always along this path, but it is very likely because what is proven now is that it can be super fast and flexible. So maybe you do something today, then you discover that it is not really what you like or what you need, so you repurpose, retrain, but it's very, very fast. So I'm not shocked that many of my colleagues decide to do pretty much the same.
So you're building Allianz GPT?
Actually, it was not us to build Allianz GPT, it was our IT team, but we can benefit out of it, and being, also in the GT area in Allianz, which is basically the technology area.
Yeah.
It's very easy for us to access all the experts, the data scientists, the IT people to support us. So they were also very happy to engage in the journey even before getting all this, admin stuff done.
Super.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep moving. So the next question we asked is, what is your GenAI ambition? Like, how high do you want to soar for GenAI and procurement in your organization? And less than 10% are prepared to wait and see, right? Almost everyone wants to get moving. They're either doing stuff or they're going to do stuff in the next 12 months. And I thought this was remarkable. We did ask one other data point, by the way, which is not on this slide, but that is, how does this compare to the wider GenAI ambitions of the organization outside of procurement? And it's pretty much the same. And this tells us that procurement is going to be at the forefront of GenAI within the enterprise. Does that resonate?
Yeah, it does, definitely. You just cannot afford to be left behind now, because this is not just a disruption to be interpreted as a challenge like many others we had in procurement in the last couple of decades. This is an opportunity to build a competitive advantage, so you just don't want to be the last one. And on top of this, there's no real trade-off when you prioritize GenAI versus other things that you might want to do, because at the end of the day, GenAI might be instrumental to all these many other things you want to do. So for example, we are exploiting it quite a lot in the regulatory area, because now with the upcoming DORA regulation, there's a lot of stuff to be done, and we are leveraging on this to do it, basically, and to eliminate a lot of manual work that we will have to comply with the regulation. Plus, it is also useful to try and see which could be the different use, because what we are seeing, for example, is that the same use case might be used for different purposes, might be easily adapted to commercial purposes, for example, starting from regulatory. So at the end of the day, this is not a problem towards the other priorities. It is actually accelerating also on other topics.
Awesome. All right, and the next question we asked was money. Is there money available? Where does it come from? And we asked two questions. So as a proportion of your technology budget in procurement, how much of that is being dedicated to GenAI? How much was dedicated last year, which is on the left, and how much is available for the next 12 months? And the main takeaway for me is that in the last 12 months, 31% had allocated less than 10%, somewhere between 0 and 10% of their budget for generative AI in procurement. For the next 12 months, it's 36%. So that 31% becomes a 36%, allocating between 25 and 50%. The middle's about the same. But the growth is in more folks allocating more budget to generative AI. So, yes, there's ambition and there's money. Is there money, really?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes just labeling GenAI is the easiest way to access budgets. So I would take these numbers with prudence. the other point is that in order to build GenAI, you need to build some prerequisites, especially in the data area. And I don't know whether the money that goes for these prerequisites is labeled as GenAI or not, and it might be different for the different respondents. So I would be kind of prudent with these numbers. But what is for sure is that the budgets in general for digital interventions in procurement are increasing, and this can only be welcome from my point of view, because procurement in many companies still suffers from kind of a digital divide that we definitely need to cover, because otherwise we will always be, that cumbersome function that you need to approach when you want to buy something, but this is not where we want to be, right?
Are you saying whatever it is, put GenAI on the business case and you get money?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, either you put regulation or GenAI. Regulation is not so sexy. GenAI is a bit more sexy, so let's put GenAI.
And then we wondered, actually, in this kind of build versus buy debate, which is kind of black and white and maybe a bit polarizing, especially at a place like DPW, where there's a lot of investment in the buy space and SaaS space. Is there a third way? And I believe there is a third way. And the company that is doing great work, and there's many examples, but the one I want to start with is Roche. The work that Patrick and his team, Marielle, Martin, Sebastian are doing with companies like Axiom and Linking is incredible, because what they've done is they've found a startup scale-up relatively early in their journey. They've invested their personal capital to accelerate the SaaS provider's path to product market fit, to revenue, introducing them to also other organizations to help them scale up quickly. And this works for Roche as well, because, of course, what's on the development plan and the features that are in the next iteration are going to be suitable for Roche's pain points. It's a really, really nice example. And I've been asking around for other examples, and it turns out they're not alone. There are many other companies taking this approach as a halfway house between build or buy. Convergentis and Suncor is another example, the large energy company. They've partnered well. Eva, Flow, and Trox, Namu and JLR, Supply Hive and Oro. There's many of the providers out there where if you dive into it, actually they are approaching co-create, and this might be a halfway house. Is it realistic?
Yeah, I think, even yesterday, together with my team, we were speaking to a company here and already thinking about co-investing on a specific topic. There might be different reasons and different shades of gray, because, sometimes you have clear ideas, stable requirements, so you just buy and scale up. Some other cases, you have no clue, so you want to generate maybe ideas together with somebody else. You do co-creation. Other times, you know what you want, but it simply doesn't exist, so you co-create. And in other cases, you know what you want, you have the possibility to do it, and so you build it in-house, with or without external support. In Allianz, we are doing many of these different things in different realms. So in some cases, we are buying. In some other cases, we are developing. In our case, we are basically developing in-house with your support. So I really think it depends on the specific situation and the use case, but I don't see any reason to take, a clear direction. I think that you can exploit all the different ways.
Very good. Okay, let's get practical. What are the challenges? What's going to stop us achieving this vision? So when we asked the 100 procurement leaders, 61 of them said lack of skills in their team, 58% said lack of knowledge, and interestingly, even an understanding of where it can be used. Like, how do you actually use this thing? Money is not the main problem for most of them. So let's focus on the first two. How have you, you're already on the journey at Allianz, so you have somehow must have addressed these challenges to allow you to get going.
Yeah.
Can you share with us what has worked?
In my usual way, by taking some risks. Because at the end of the day, procurement went through a number of disruptions in the last years. You name it, starting from financial crisis, and then pandemic, and then wars, and then a lot of inflation, etc. So at the end of the day, every time you are facing a lack of capability, of knowledge, some fear, some cultural resistance, etc., you need to learn. You just need to learn. And sometimes learning is better if you don't know too much about it. So what I did, basically, we hired a person to lead the GenAI and analytic journey from a completely different industry. So he
into procurement?
Yes. He had no clue about procurement, and actually we took the make or buy decision while hiring him, because we were wondering, should we hire somebody like this or somebody who comes more from the traditional, procurement controlling, procurement planning, etc. And so we took this kind of implicit make or buy decision during the hiring process, and it revealed to be successful at the end of the day because this person has a deep data science background. And for the overall transformation instead, we did something probably even bolder. So we took a bunch of 30-year-olds, and 2 of them are here in the first row. And we basically told them, do what you want without legacy. So they don't have to kill their own babies, basically.
Yeah.
So they are like free to really do what they believe is the right thing now. And this is working.
Okay. And in terms of the skills, so you wanted to be unencumbered by legacy.
Yeah.
But what were the specific skills that you looked for when hiring this person to bring them in?
First of all, the intellectual agility. So, and the capability to really envision what the future could be. So a lot of intellectual agility and strategic thinking, and all the rest can be done. But what worries me the most actually is not the lack of capabilities, because at the end of the day, clever people cover the gap in capabilities, but is the speed at which large corporates typically operate, which is not the same pace at which the technology is evolving. So this is what concerns me the most. So not being able to move at the right speed sometimes.
So the tech is faster than the organization?
Yes.
Okay.
and then the bigger you are, the worse it is.
Yeah, right. And then how did you figure out where to start or where it can be used? Because there's a lot of excitement around use cases, and people are just going, okay, I'll just go a use case. Was that your approach, or how did you figure that out?
Yeah, my problem is actually the opposite, because every night I generate ideas, and then my teams need to try to say, okay, no, this we do, this we don't do now, this we do later. So we have the opposite problem to converge and to select what we do, because otherwise, every morning I come, look, I have an idea. But there are just too many, so they are trying to put discipline. Let's say.
Okay, thank you for acknowledging the challenges you bring to your team. All right, so we're going to need heroes to address this. Who are going to be the heroes, do you think?
Well, it needs to be us, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But I think that, the real heroes in this specific situation are those who dare. So those who have courage, who are not afraid to fail, who take bold decisions. And, if you fail, no problem. You take this model and repurpose and use it for something else, and nobody would even realize. I think that GenAI, as far as I could experience so far, is not really the realm for perfectionism. As a woman, I'm a perfectionist, so I'm suffering quite a lot in accepting this. But at the end of the day, this is what we experience so far, because the big challenge is the accuracy, obviously, of the models. So you need to accept that we will not have, a 90% accuracy after 2 weeks. You need to accept that while you develop your models, your requirements will change, and somebody else will come with new ideas, new opportunities, or maybe reasons why it is not anymore useful. And we experience that, because out of the 3 use cases that we have already in place now, 1, we basically don't need it anymore. So we are now repurposing and retraining for at least 3 different objectives. But again, this is not an issue, because given that technology is fast, you can basically afford to rework, and this is also probably one of the advantages of doing it in-house, no? Because if we had bought something and then you discover after 2 months that you don't need it anymore, then you have, these sunk costs for the licenses that are not really pleasant, let's say, to bear.
Yeah.
So by keeping this in-house for the moment, we can afford also making mistakes.
All right. And last word, Valentina, where are you in terms of the optimism and passion and risk-taking and daring, balanced with the organization slower than the tech, the challenges that you face internally, and where are you on that balance in terms of optimism and kind of, is this going to happen?
We compensate each other, let's say, in the team, because what I typically do, I try to hire in my first line people who are different from me, who can compensate what I do not do or what I do not like doing. So at the end of the day, I typically, maybe my team should answer, not me, but I tend to be the one.
They might ask questions.
Yeah. I tend to be the one who keeps on pushing, and then somebody else needs to basically do the reality check. So they need to tell me, this is not possible, this you will take 6 months, this you need to convince 150 stakeholders. And so at the end of the day, we find a compromise and try to focus on what is useful, realistic, and kind of, a bit of a dream at least.
All right, very good. All right, thank you. So I'm going to go back. So not all heroes wear capes. I agree with you. The heroes are the ones in your team, the ones in this room. Maybe Kearney. Go and talk to your local Kearney hero. We love to share our stories and our experiences. And we have time for questions. We've got 8 minutes left. So Katie, can you help us?
Sure. Let's see. Okay. We'll put that Slido QR back on up so you can send in your... Oh, we've got some questions. There we go. So we'll start with the first one. What use cases are you exploring?
We are exploring use cases, first of all, on the contract part, because starting from the problem we have, as you might imagine, we have like tens, thousands contracts in a number of different languages, coming from different geographies and sitting initially on different tools. So what we are doing now, given that we are required by regulation to extract a number of metadata from this contract, we started basically to tackle the DORA challenges with DORA.
DORA is the financial services regulation.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, coming from financial services, I give this for granted. But now the financial services are undergoing a kind of whole load of new regulation that actually was already gone in banking, and now also insurance is facing it. So it is really a lot. So 40% of the investments in the financial institutions is going for regulation at the moment. So we are using it for these purposes. Then we are using GenAI also for supplier qualification in order to avoid a lot of manual work. And what we are exploring now, but it is not yet ready, is instead basically the same engine that we will use for commercial purposes to basically extract from our contracts all the potential arbitrage situations that we have around the world in the various categories. And and there are many others that we are thinking about, but they are not yet deployed. So we started from regulation because we have a kind of compelling need to do it now, because it's going into force in Jan.
Yeah, I agree. Contracts, probably the hottest one out there right now. I think it's partly because it's kind of easy to do in the sense that there's not a lot of data dependencies. You just need to get all your contracts somehow into a folder, and you don't need to integrate with many systems to be able to do that. I think that's one part. The other part, I think, out of the box, the technology that most enterprises have available to them in terms of cloud infrastructure and LLM kind of gets you halfway there already. And then the ability to be able to ingest the contracts, extract, even reason, and kind of put together elements of the contract in a meaningful way, and even query them in a natural language way, it doesn't take long. I mean, we've done that, and it takes about 3 months maximum to be able to build that solution at a relatively modest cost. So that's a really hot one, because it essentially unlocks the value that's in your contracts, because we know, like the teams that are in S2C, they spend a huge amount of effort on the sourcing side, get all that value locked into a contract, but then to operationalize that value day to day, it doesn't always translate, and there's a gap. So that's a really hot one. But there's use cases all over the place. There's also non-traditional use cases around should-cost modeling in areas like IT services, like whoever thought of doing that, like doing a should-cost model on the quantity of hours. We know how to benchmark rates, but the quantity of hours, generative AI is particularly good at that. But we're seeing use cases on spend, on sustainability, on compliance, many. But I'll repeat my point earlier. The true power comes from linking those agents together. It's the multi-agent model that brings it all together, that supports decisions and allows you to run processes.
And be aware that GenAI is not so good with numbers. So if you start with contracts, it's safer.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind for the Avengers out there. Great, a lot of folks wanting to know, what platforms do you use for developing in-house applications?
We use our, let's say, standard Allianz platform. We have a group data platform that is sitting on Azure. And we have our own Allianz GPT, which is a kind of a customized version of OpenAI GPT. This is what we have now, let's say as a main platform, but we have also a number of other tools that we are not using in procurement, but maybe we are using in the business. There are a lot of use cases that you are applying in other functions. Just to give you an example, we do insurance, so we need to process claims. Now, whenever you have, for example, a car accident, there's somebody who needs to assess the amount of the damage to then refund you. And this is also done now in some cases through GenAI, because basically the GenAI looks at the pictures of the damage, they assess how much it is worth, and then the claims process starts. This is just one of the many. We have others in HR, tax, legal, all those functions who deal with a whole lot of text, but there are really many things that you can do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, in the sense that the most popular platforms we see out there are like Azure and OpenAI. That's probably the most popular combination out there, but we are platform agnostic, so we'll work with whatever the client's got. It doesn't matter if it's Azure, AWS, or Gemini, or OpenAI, or Claude. Yes, some are better than others, but that's really not. If that's what the meaning was behind the question, like, is there a right one? There isn't. Just use whatever you have. It's all possible.
Excellent. Nice. All right. So our next one, folks are saying this is very surprising that data quality is not listed as a challenge. Do you have an assumption as to why?
No, it is a challenge. Of course it is a challenge, because, I mean, if you don't have decent data, of course, also the output cannot be decent. But this is what I was mentioning when I was thinking about prerequisites, no? Because this is one of the prerequisites that you need to have. But again, I don't think that GenAI is there to be perfect. It's there to be fast and to be insightful. So I'm not expecting GenAI to solve my data problem. So I need to solve my data problems aside and then use GenAI progressively on what I have. We are still fighting with data quality because our group has a very federated governance model. So at the end of the day, you cannot really impose exactly the same processes, tools, models, etc. to everybody. This is what we are actually doing now. So this transformation will be quite disruptive, let's say, for the entities in the group. But in any case, with or without bad data, you still have data. So let's start to use them.
There was a fourth bar on the capabilities chart that I kind of didn't show because it was only 1%. So if on the skills, capabilities, and kind of funding, those 3 bars, there was a 1% bar on other. So I think some people were worried about data. But it is interesting that that was not a big theme. I think it's partly because there's a lot of hype around GenAI and people haven't thought through all the prerequisites. At the same time, there's certain use cases out there where data is not a prerequisite, so people see the possibility.
All right, I think we've got time for one last question. Here we go. So we've got, how do you ensure that your GenAI project is not a vanity project and will support business goals?
Well, it's up to the business to define what they want. So in our case, we know what we want, and so we build the models according to what we want. And when it comes instead of our role as procurement, so to accompany our business owners into their journey into GenAI, because they need to select a vendor, for example, again, the requirements is always the most tricky part, because if you don't know what you want, with or without GenAI, it doesn't really make a difference. So, I mean, having clear ideas where you want to go is always the key point for me.
We have a simple test for that. So before we agree to work on any GenAI use case, it has to pass the business case test. And there's 3 pillars in the business case for us. One is efficiency. So does it materially make things easier, faster in the organization? And potentially, does it free up people? Either you can repurpose or reduce headcount. The second one is effectiveness. Does it allow you to manage your third-party spend better and get savings there? And the third one is, does it enhance user experience and increase compliance? If it does those things, we know there's value there, then we can proceed.
Fantastic. Any last words from you two before we wrap it up?
No, just don't be afraid, go for it.
Absolutely. Be the heroes, go for it.
Yes, be the Hulk, be Captain Marvel, whoever, I don't know. Yeah. Thanks so much to our 2 speakers.